Coming up on This Week in Agribusiness, there's much more at stake in any border closure than just avocados and beer. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this weekend's edition of This Week in Agribusiness. Alongside me at the table, Steve Bridge, farm broadcaster from Springfield, Illinois. Good to see you.
Great to see you, Max. And there is a lot at stake right now between what's going on with the U.S. and Mexico down at that border. So for an accounting of that, the impacts, or the potential impacts of it, Veronica Nigh joins us, economist with the American Farm Bureau Federation. And Veronica, right now, going to give us an idea of what is at stake between the United States and Mexico when it comes to all of this talk of a border shutdown.
Well, certainly. I think through the discussions on USMCA, we've been talking about how important Mexico is as a trade partner. So you've probably heard me say this before, but Mexico is our third largest export destination for U.S. ag products. Last year, we exported almost $20 billion worth of food products from the United States to our Mexican customers. It'd be a big deal if we were no longer able to access those customers.
We have heard about, say, avocados, as Max mentioned, but for the American farmer in the Midwest or throughout the Great Plains, what are their top commodities that are then going to Mexico? Well,
the Mexican export market is incredibly important for Midwestern producers. It's our top market for U.S. dairy products, one of our top markets for U.S. pork, U.S. beef, corn. They're also a large user of dried distillers grains. The list goes on and on. It would certainly hit us hard and throughout the United States if the border were closed.
And so for dairy producers, things right now have not been good in dairy country. That export market still being there, critically important for their economic health right now.
Absolutely. You know, I think it's important to continue to realize that dairy prices have been in the tank for 5 years now. Mexico is such an incredibly important market. It's already been hit hard by the retaliatory tariffs that have gone into effect because of the steel and aluminum tariffs the U.S. has put on Mexico. So there's a lot going on here. And this additional layer would only make it all the more difficult for U.S. dairy producers to compete in this important market.
So, Veronica, you say the third biggest market for U.S. ag products. If that market would be shut down, even temporarily, would those goods from U.S. farmers go someplace else? Would they be able to?
Some of that product is especially grown, specially packaged for the Mexican market. It would probably be difficult to move that product quickly to other markets. I'd also mention that we're already in sort of a strange trade environment right now with our traditional trade paths maybe being a little different than they've been in the recent years. So there's already been a lot of strange, if you will, buying going on around the world. An additional layer of having to sell product that's destined for the Mexican market around the world would probably happen, but what we can guarantee would happen is that U.S. farmers would have to accept lower prices for their products in order to find those new markets.
I'm thinking, Veronica, of how our product moves to Mexico, and much of it, I think the grains, for example, distillers grains, would move via rail cars. I can imagine there's quite a bit of truck traffic, too. This would be a logistics nightmare, would it not? I mean, just holding up all of the product, keeping it from going into Mexico.
Sure. Well, you're right. Corn and soybeans and distillers grains tends to move by rail, but in the reality, about 70% of all trade between Mexico and the U.S. happens by truck. So when we talk about, the border closing or even delays, all of that additional time spent by truckers at the border waiting for an inspection adds up. And when we're talking about perishable products like meat products, fruits and vegetables, dairy products, that takes away from the shelf life, and that's going to impact both consumers and producers.
If nothing else, Veronica, this discussion that is being had here does provide somewhat of a teachable moment, does it not, to talk about the importance of the USMCA and what that neighbor to the south means to us?
That's a good point. And I think we've all been learning new lessons on trade in the last several years about how to talk about it and how complicated trade actually is and how much trade happens every day. Just thinking about closing It was announced that the Nogales port in our border crossing in Arizona was going to be closed for 4 hours. No big deal. That doesn't seem like a big deal anyway. $14 million worth of ag product goes through that border crossing alone every day. So thinking about the magnitude of our trade between our two countries is certainly instructive and gives us a clear idea of how important the relationship is to both countries.
Veronica Nigh, thank you for joining us on This Week in Agribusiness. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Veronica is an economist at the American Farm Bureau Federation.